Hi YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. This one is going to be kind of an expansion on a video I just did that I answered as part of my Q&A. I know that video is like 40 minutes long, so not everybody is going to want to like sit and watch like 25 minutes of video before I get to that particular question, and that is how to get into Petspace. Just what is Petspace? I get a lot of questions on my channel in general. It's probably one of the most asked things that I get is just how do I get into Petspace, or I'm not into Petspace as much as I used to or as much as I want to be. Like, how do I get over that? How do I basically be in Petspace more? And I think in order to adequately answer that question, I do need to take like an entire video to do it. So that is what we are doing today. And also, in order to be able to sort of fully understand this topic, I first want to go over what subspace is, what Petspace is, what do those terms actually mean as I understand them. So Petspace is sort of a subcategory of the sort of larger psychological state known as subspace. There's also rope space, which is a form of subspace, and there's also little space, which is a form of subspace. And they're all basically just alternative states of mind that generally occur as a result of an element that is happening as part of a scene or an element of power exchange. These are different states of mind. For me personally, when I think of something like rope space or subspace in general, it tends to be very meditative and internal, and as part of Petspace specifically, I conceive as Petspace being a state of mind when I have lost a portion of my human faculties. I am not able to make rational human decisions. I am not sort of necessarily fully aware of my surroundings in the same way a human would be. I tend to conceive of things more like an animal would, specifically like a dog would, although you can of course substitute any sort of animal that you identify with as part of pet play, whether that be a cat or a fox or a rabbit or whatever. Basically, your state of mind becomes less like that of a human and more like that of a pet. Now, the thing to keep in mind with any of these things, whether it be rope space, subspace, little space, whatever it is, you're not going to be there all the time when you do a scene, and not being in that particular state of mind, not having the altered state of mind, doesn't mean that you're a failure as a submissive, doesn't mean that the scene went badly, doesn't mean that something is wrong, or that you're not really a pet, or not really little, or not really into rope. It is a very complicated psychological thing, and if you're doing a scene where one of the elements that you need in order to go into subspace, whether or not you know what that is, if that's not there, it can be difficult to get there. For me, things have to be quiet. If I am in a dungeon where it's loud and there are people making like really loud sexual noises in the background, if I'm in rope, I'm not going to be able to get into rope space. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't enjoy the tie. It just means that I'm going to be more consciously aware. I'm not going to get into that sort of blissed out state that a lot of people get into when they're in rope. And that's just how things are going to be, and you have to accept that about yourself. Get used to the idea that being in pet space is not a requirement of being a pet. It's not a requirement of being part of a pet play scene. It's really nice when it's there, yes, but it's not a requirement, and it's okay. It's okay to not be in a really deep pet space whenever you do a pet play scene. That's just not that's not possible. There's going to be times when you're doing a scene and things aren't going to go the way that you plan, and that's just, facts of life. Now, I think the reason why a lot of people ask this question, it's less about how do I get to that really deep meditative state of mind, which I will talk about. It's more, how do I get in the mood to do pet play? How do I actually get myself to want to behave like a pet? Not necessarily the very deep mental emotional aspect of it, but more the physical belief that you are that animal temporarily as part of a scene, or just how do I convince myself to sort of have that cognitive dissonance, to sort of have that suspension of disbelief where I can pretend that I'm an animal in a convincing way that works for both myself and my partner. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I think, as I talked about in my Q&A that I did, I think it is really important to have cues that let you know when it's appropriate to be in pet play mode or little mode or whatever, any sort of submissive type of mode, it's important to have cues. So you can wear specific collars that trigger you to know, okay, this is a time we're going to be doing pet play. This is a time we're going to be doing pet play. There can be certain articles of clothing that you wear. Maybe it's certain articles of your clothing that your partners wear. Perhaps you present them with a leash when you're ready to do a pet play scene, or maybe they approach you with a leash, let them know when they would like to do a pet play scene. Basically, the more number of unique things that you assign only to pet play or DDLG or whatever kind of specific subspace you want to go into, the easier it will be once you become able to associate those things with pet play. They should be able to help you get to Petspace because they become so deeply ingrained in your mind with those kind of behaviors. Ideally, you would have like a few number of specific things. Like you would have one specific collar and one specific outfit, just so that way your brain can really just narrow down and focus on those things, and it becomes very instant for some people. Like I know people who the second they have rope on, they are just blissed out in rope space. For me, I can't do that, and that's just how life is. That's how my brain works. I do have anxiety, so my brain is normally like doing a million other things at the same time, and it does take a while, and a lot of specific things have to happen in order for my brain to calm down enough for that kind of thing to take place. I think also you just need to consider the fact that sometimes you're not going to be in the mood to do pet play, or you're not going to have scenes where you're just like completely like, yes, this is the best scene ever. Because sometimes that happens, and that's okay, and that's a learning experience. You can take away from that not necessarily how awesome the scene was, but what was missing. What about it would you have wished went differently? And that's just as important to be able to get into Petspace for later scenes when you know what you need because something was missing in a different scene. I think something that can also be really helpful is just research about what kind of animal you are. If you're a dog, read about dog psychology. There's plenty of really cute videos out there that you can watch that talk for hours and hours and hours about different kinds of cute things that puppies and kittens do. And being able for both you and your partner to understand the psychology of an animal when you are doing a pet play scene, it helps it be more convincing and real when you're able to adopt those same behaviors accurately. There are lots of activities that you can do that can help you get more in the mood to either want to do a pet play scene, or as part of a pet play scene, help you get closer to that pet play headspace. If you like, you can eat or drink out of bowls. So don't necessarily have to be pet bowls. I know some of them can be pretty deep and like hard to drink or eat out of because just human anatomy is different than cat or dog or ferret or whatever anatomy. It's not always going to work. But having something you specifically use to eat out of as part of a pet play scene, again, is going to help with those psychological triggers to help you know, okay, this is the time when I'm being a pet. This is, something that can help me progress to being in Petspace. Generally having restriction over your movements and the things you're able to do. For example, not being able to open up the door. I know some dogs, my dog at home, and we have those like doorknobs that go like this. She can jump up on them and like press them down and open doors, but generally things like not being able to open up cupboards or doors, not being able to get through baby gates, having to bark or cry or whatever it is if you're being a little. Generally restrictions in communication and movement that while a human might possess, an animal doesn't, can help you with that a lot. You can have like specific food they use just for pet play, but do not use actual animal food. I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not use real animal food as part of pet play. It's not meant for human digestive systems. It's not healthy for humans to eat. The nutritional needs of pets is very different than that of a human. You need to take that into account. If you are a cat, you could do something like maybe tuna fish. You can mix it with mayonnaise if you want and have like a tuna salad in your bowl. If you're a dog, there's plenty of different kinds of cereal out there that resembles dog kibble you could use. Things low sugar, I would recommend. If you're doing a continuous scene, you're doing something with treat training, which I'm going to talk about in a second, it's important to be aware that, yes, treats are tasty in small amounts, but it's also very easy to make yourself sick if you're having something with a lot of sugar in it. Something else that can help, I just talked about briefly, is treat training as well. This is something that I really like specifically because I'm a dog, but if you're made to beg for treats, if you're taught how to do tricks as part of being trained with treats, if you're taught how to walk on a leash, for example, which again I'm going to get into more in a second, that can also be really, really great pet play activity and something that can also really just help you get into Petspace. And kind of going back to what I talked about earlier about restricted movement, I think something that is really helpful is depending on how intense you want the scene to be. Also just being restricted to movement on all fours, not being allowed up on furniture. Those are two big things. Of course, if you're like a naughty cat and you like jump up on the top of the couch, that can be fun as well. Generally not being allowed on furniture and having restricted movement of your limbs. So, for example, they make puppy play mitts, which I feel like we may have around here somewhere. We have puppy play mitts like these. These are made out of leather. Although I think you can probably find these in like a vegan material as well. But basically, you put your hand in there like a fist, and it restricts your ability to use your digits, and that can really help. I've also seen these in latex as well that have a little paws on them and stuff. If you're more of a latex versus a leather kind of a person. Depending on how your knuckles are set up, this can be kind of uncomfortable, but the padding does help, especially if you are in a place where you have lots of hardwood floors or granite or something. Like you just have a very hard surface to walk on. These are really cushiony and really great as well. You can also have it if you're doing something that's really intense where your limbs are bound to each other like this and you're made to like walk on your elbows and your knees, but that can be very uncomfortable. You can also mix and match these. So for example, you could be walking on your fists and then also having your legs tied in like a fudo behind your back, which is a type of shibari tie where your legs are like bound together like this, so that way you're forced to walk on your knees. Do be careful about this though. You should wear pads on your knees if you're going to be doing this because it can be very rough on your joints, especially if you have any sort of pre-existing sports related injury or just bad knee cartilage or something. And take breaks, take your time. Generally, if I'm doing a pet play scene that involves a lot of walking around, we'll have quieter moments where either I'm sitting or I'm in a cage and like my knee pad or something have been removed just so that way I don't wear them down too much. I have had times where like the pads slip down and I like didn't even notice, and just oh my god, my knees make me feel like an old person when that happens. My knees just hurt so badly and I just have to do like ice and heat over and over again for like days to make them better. You can also have sessions, for example, where you're being groomed. Maybe you're the kind of pet who doesn't like being groomed. You can do kind of like a fun, naughty pet play scene that way, where you like try to run away and escape it. But being brushed. If you're a pony, for example, they make sort of firmer bristled brushes where you can just like brush up and down, like on your arm, your hair, whatever, just generally being petted and taken care of. You can also do it maybe where you're taking a bath and you're being like washed up in that way, or you can just have it where it's just you're being pet because you're a good puppy or kitty or whatever it is, and that can be very relaxing, especially towards the end of a scene to kind of help wrap things up and make them into a nice little complete package of pet play. And the last thing that I want to talk about in this video are specific pet names. So you could have, maybe you're a submissive and you're only a pet a part of the time, but when you're doing a pet play scene, you're called a very specific name. Let's say, I don't know, like Beauty because you're a pony, or like Fluffy because you're a dog or cat or something like that. Just any sort of ridiculous name you can come up with that you're only called as part of a pet play scene. And maybe when you're doing a pet play scene, you only call your dominant a certain name. Like, I don't know, you call them Daddy, you can keep calling them Sir if you want to, but having specific names attached to your pet play headspace versus your everyday self or the rest of your submissive task can really help you sort of separate the two different scenes, the two different dynamics that are happening, and help you again get into that more pet focused space rather than just your everyday regular human life. There are plenty of other ideas for scenes. I sort of covered a lot of them throughout this video talking about ways to get into Petspace. Again, you could have scenes where you are being groomed, you could have scenes where you're doing training, you could have scenes where you're being taught how to walk on a leash or you're, being walked on a leash. You could have your movement restricted. You could be wearing a gag, like a bone gag or something, where your movement and your ability to speak is really restricted. You could have scenes where you're being caged or confined, which are really good as part of downtime for a scene, especially if it's one that's previously been really active. Like, let's say you've been made to go and fetch newspapers and toys and things like that, and that can be a lot of wear and tear on your joints, especially depending on how your movement has been restricted. There are also plenty of times when people do pet play scenes as part of, like, I don't know, kind of mixing it with medical play and doing sort of a veterinary care scene. You could mix it with like needle play and pretend that you're getting shots, although obviously you don't actually inject anybody with anything. You can just like pretend that's what you're doing with needles. Just there are so many different kinds of pet play scenes out there. You could have scenes where you're playing with another pet. It can either be a scene where it's sort of a switch type situation where the two animals are trying to establish a hierarchy, or it could just be kind of a fun scene between like two friendly pets playing and getting along with each other. You could also have scenes that involve rope. You could have a scene, for example, where if you're a pony, you're trying to be wrangled because you're like a wild horse, and they're gonna bring you in and break you and turn you into a riding horse or something. And as part of that, they're gonna restrict you and tie you up in rope, and then bring you along. Or you could be maybe like an escaped animal, like from a zoo or from somebody's house, and maybe you're like a rabid dog, and like you need to be taken back in and put back in your cage, and as part of that, you can do like a rope scene. Just really use your creativity. If it's anything that you've done with a pet, it's something you can probably do with somebody who is a human pet. And that's really everything I want to talk about in this video. If you have any other questions about Petspace or Petplay Activities or anything like that, please leave them down below. I'm always happy to answer questions or make more videos on this particular subject, whatever it is you guys need. I always just love hearing from you all, and just thanks again for all that support for my last Q&A. I got so many good questions, and now I'm going to be making more videos sort of expanding on those questions, which would be a lot of fun. I do make videos twice a week, and if you haven't already, please subscribe down below, maybe leave a like if you want to, and until I see you next, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.